Wilfred, welcome. What time is it where you are? You're in the same
Oh,
time zone
let's
as
see,
Mike, I
just
believe.
after 7 a.m.
Just after 7 a.m. Okay.
Yeah, it's
I
not
always,
bad. Lights
yeah,
up, life is starting.
you dress very smiley for 7 a.m. We appreciate that.
I've got other things I have to go to, but I got dressed up just for you guys.
I feel awkward. Look at this. That's why I'm commenting. I'm like, sorry, I knew it was going to be a late night, so I'm like, I'm going to have to dress casually just so I stay awake. So anyway, in keeping with time, because we've got, I think, about 26 minutes. We've got another thing after this. Guys, welcome to Wilfred. He is the CEO of a company called Urban Systems. I always love when you give your background. So if you want to maybe give 2 minutes on your background as well as Urban Systems and the Citizen app, that's great because I think it's very relevant. And yeah, I'll just hand over to you far away. And anyone with questions, shoot them in the box for after he's finished presenting what the Citizen app is doing.
So yeah, actually, I'll talk a little bit about two companies, but a little bit on me first, since been asked. We share a background. We both trained as naval architects. I grew up mostly in the UK, studied in Glasgow, came out to the US in 1980. Was practicing naval architect for several years. And then I got into computational fluid dynamics from that point and spent most of my career at Intel. And hence the reason why I live in Portland, Oregon today, and love the city. And the two companies I want to talk about really sort of build on what Irene was saying about sort of the stack of, getting up to the applications. And I'll talk more about one of the applications that we've been very involved in, which is really related to smart cities. And part of the reason why that's a really interesting market, other than that it's a very rapidly growing market, still fairly nascent, great time to get in. And part of the reason that it's nascent is the business models don't work well. The business models we've developed for the commercial world are not fitting very well. And a large part of that is really related to our relationship with cities and states and municipalities, and how it differs from our relationship with companies and corporations. So whereas large data files that allow companies to sort of mine into your data and predict your behavior and provide you the products you want before you want them, then that is not what cities want to do. Cities want to provide services, and large data files, large data stores that have large amounts of private information, because the kinds of services they offer us can be tailored really to our needs in ways that would be quite privacy intrusive, knowing income levels and locations of in which we live. That kind of data becomes a liability for most municipalities, and they don't see value to it. They don't see value to keeping it. So you see in many places efforts to build large data stores in the way that corporations have done it, going poorly used because of these challenges. And so the plumbing that Dan and Irene have been talking about, which I think is plumbing akin to Google being plumbing, is there to create new business models, business models we can build on. And I think it's particularly applicable in the situation of smart cities. So we've built two entities. The first one is a nonprofit, which I'll talk about a lot here, because I think there's an opportunity to engage in that. It's a 501c6, so it's a membership organization, and it's done in partnership with government agencies, municipalities, universities, and companies. And then Urban Systems, which is our commercial entity, and sits effectively on top of that, and will compete with other members of Open Commons to deliver services to those municipalities. So let me give a little bit of background there. The real purpose of Open Commons is to build community. It's to bring together all of those entities who care about delivering municipal services, everything from our the state level ownership documents like driver's license and ID, at the city level, giving us access to public transit, to water, waste systems, etc. And there are a growing number of good examples of smart city services that are out there today, and they're very fragmented. They're very splintered. You can't really sign up as a city member, as a citizen, and then access those services. You often find yourself signing up for individual services, or getting a specific card to get on public transit, and they're very uncoordinated. They're good, they're very helpful, they give us the services we want, but they're fragmented. And so we have started to build a catalog of those various services, and allowing cities to see what other cities have done, and learn on them, and learn from them, build on them. There are a couple of thousand cities just in the US alone, let alone around the world, and many of them are delivering very similar kinds of services, and most of them have their own proprietary solutions to those, and many of them would benefit, if not from using the same software as other municipalities have, at least building on that software. And so this idea of collaboration between municipalities and building a catalog of these solutions becomes very attractive. And we've worked closely with the Department of Commerce here in the US, and the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is a part of the Department of Commerce. We're part of a group called the Global City Teams Challenge that has built about 170 catalog, about 170 projects. The Open Commons database is larger than that, but we house those projects for them. They're just approved projects that have been reviewed by the National Institute of Standards and posted by them for their community of users. But within Open Commons is a much larger catalog of projects broken down into various different areas that we call superclusters around things like building and transportation. So that's really the first function. The second function is really to bring together code elements, code components and applications that can be used to deliver those services. Again, in an open source sense, not that there won't be a lot of commercial software in this space, but that ability to build on those services, to see reference designs and to build on those, becomes extremely valuable when you look across those municipalities. So there's also a growing catalog of software elements and software codes growing in the Open Commons GitHub repository and Docker repositories. So that's really the sort of framing of Open Commons. And we've worked with National Institute of Standards, and they with other standards bodies, to create a framework around which those applications can be built, with an understanding that that the market is somewhat hindered by the lack of this framework. That the fact that the way that every city looks at transportation data is different. The way that every city looks at their water supply system and how they log data about flows and other things are all different, which means that if you're going to put a dashboard up in Portland, it's going to have a lot of different APIs to it than the one in Austin, even though they're basically doing the same thing. And so can we look for a way, first of all, to make those interoperable at that level, but actually more fundamentally at the individual level, at the citizen level, how does a citizen move between those municipalities and get the kinds of services they want as they move around? And those municipalities are not always as far apart as Austin and Portland. Within the metro area that I live in around Portland, there are, I think, 26 or 27 municipalities, all of which interact, some of which share a transit system. And you don't want to have to, change application because you move between governance municipalities. So giving some portability to the citizen so as they can, move around between these municipalities and continue to get services. So, back to that sort of core element that we talked about, the plumbing that Irene talked about, as you think about that usage model, you start to realize it would be a lot better if the data moved with the individual, if as the person moved between municipalities, they took their data with them, they moved with their data, and that their data was then able to interact with the services. Further, as you think about that model, what you start to understand is that that person is only transacting the data that they need for the service that they're getting. They don't leave a trace of data. They don't leave a lot of data. I mean, the municipalities could collect that data. There's nothing stopping them collecting that data, but there's no advantage to it from their perspective. They want to deliver the service. They want to know who their customer they're delivering the service to. They want to know that that customer is eligible for that service, that they, you know, have the whatever it is, the right education level, the right income level. They need to know those things for that transaction, but they don't necessarily want to keep a trace of that transaction. There may be situations in which they do, and that's fine too. But it's better if the citizen is directly engaged in that transaction and provides that information for that transaction at the time of transaction. And so this is built into the framework, and we're looking at trying to build around this. So this is, you know, this is one of those views of sort of pushing the data to the edge. And I liked Ben's comments there about PDAs being attached to objects. We certainly see it that way. And or personal data stores being attached to objects, also being attached to services that you know, the Portland Bureau of Transportation may have its own PDS, right? That it has a lot of information that it's collecting about delivering transportation services, and it may in fact have its own, you know, huge data lake behind that, but it operates as a personal data store. When you transact with Portland Bureau of Transportation, you're transacting with another data store, and those transactions are conducted you know, point to point at the time of that transaction. And you start to see this whole system working more effectively, that I can transact with all sorts of things. I can transact with the lamppost that has a camera on it that tells me whether there's a parking space beneath that. The camera doesn't have to share video data with me. It just has to say, it has to respond to a question. I ask it, hey, is there a parking space? And it says, yes, there's a parking space underneath me, or no, there isn't. So you're transacting with objects and services and individuals and bureaus throughout the day, and you're not having to divulge huge amounts of personal information. And every time you do the transaction, you are engaged in approving that transaction. That data is shared for that purpose. So it's just it provides a different foundation for building different business models than the ones that we use today. And I think that opens up this huge space, this huge opportunity for additional new services that can be provided by, in our case, cities and municipalities, without carrying the liability of large amounts of personal data that they have to hang on to and manage and worry about both it's being out of date and it's being attacked because it's a large target. So let's keep going. The where we are today and where we are working with Dataswift and the great technology that they've developed is we've agreed to work together on what's called a Citizen App, which is an open source version of the foundational components of that PDS, and it allows us then to start to work on adoption, to get cities to move in this direction. And to build out their applications on an open code base where they are not tying themselves to a particular direction, that they're able to participate, become members of Open Commons, share their knowledge with us, build out an open platform for the Citizen App that the citizens can use. And we believe that once that is built out, that once we start to get that kind of adoption for the Citizen App, all the services behind it start to become much more viable, that you get a much larger group of users able to do that. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that there won't be commercial citizen apps. In fact, part of the reason that we see the importance of companies like Urban Systems, which I'll talk about in just a second, is that when it comes to delivering those services from cities, they need to be production worthy. They need to have a commercial entity behind them that somebody can go to and say, hey, this is not working, you need to fix it. And you're commercially liable to go fix it. So the Citizen App is sort of a foundational component. It allows the cities to experiment and develop their apps. It even allows the cities, in many cases, if they're large enough and they can build their own software teams, to deliver their own citizen apps that are compatible with the services behind them. But it also allows them to go out and contract with consultants and vendors to customize citizen apps for a particular purpose that they have and deliver particular services in the way they want to. But in order to win adoption, we have to have an open code base that exposes those APIs in a way that people can learn from them and use them and build services behind, and allows different companies, universities, and cities to follow a pathway that's interoperable with all the other ones. So today we're launching this activity around the Citizen app. We would love anybody on this call to come join us. Open Commons, you can go to Citizen app on Open Commons and you can read about what the Citizen app is. You can go to the GitHub and find code that allows you to assemble a sort of initial version of the Citizen app, and join us and work with us to move this technology forward and start to win adoption, work with cities in your area. We're already working through the National Institute of Standards and Technology with a number of municipalities in this area. And we are working with a couple of other groups, both in Europe around work that's been done in the various FIWARE organizations. I don't know if anybody's familiar with those, but they've been working on smart city applications for a while. And with a group in Baltimore called the OSPO Plus Group, OSPO standing for Open Source Program Office, both of which are fairly sizable communities of people working on civic applications. So please come and join us and work with us on this. I wanted to finish with just a discussion a little bit about urban systems and where we see ourselves going on this platform. This is, as I mentioned at the beginning, a very rapidly growing marketplace with as we come out of COVID closed down and we look for ways to stimulate economies. Governments are putting money into infrastructure and municipal services. It's a really good time to be working in this space. So there's a huge commercial opportunity here for companies that are willing to work together, work with open standards, work with open APIs, and start to develop these applications and deliver these kinds of services. Again, I would encourage people to join us through Open Commons, to work with us on the Civic app, and let's see where we can take all of this. So that was my sort of 15 to 20 minutes. Ben, I'll pull you back in and see where we want to go from here.
Love it. Thank you, Wilfred. That's super insightful. So we haven't got any questions yet, so I'll give folks a minute or two to think of those. I personally love the application possibilities within smart cities. I actually think there's, in terms of really impacting the world and adoption, for me, I guess there's sort of three cases personally, one being HR, or maybe, I don't know, something to do with your sort of educational records, etc., because that's a real nexus point of where life begins for you. I'd say health records, but health records aren't a nexus point for a lot of other things, sadly, but they are very useful. The other being smart cities, because smart cities touch everybody. So my question therein lying being, because it's a big ocean, when you walk into a city, there's a lot of services touch, there's a lot of things you do. In your opinion, because you really are an expert in the field, like where do you feel the starting cases for application of a citizen app would be? Like what are the most useful basic services? And I asked that from two vectors really. One is simple use, because folks on this call, you know, it's an open source app, they can start doing this themselves. How do we do it simply? And then the second one is to complicate it a little bit. How do we get it into people's hands? And that might lie in the basis of the service itself. But yeah, where's the minimum starting point in your opinion, and where they should be employed to begin with?
Well, it's a really good question. First of all, there are many services out there that are fragmented, right? So without there are attempts to build on old business infrastructure, you know, building large data lakes, delivering services within cities. They are hampered. I would say that probably the most common smart city application out there is transportation related, right? It's you know, there are lots of cards out there that let you get on public transit. There are apps on your phone that tell you when buses are coming. There are good and there are parking apps. You know, it's all related to transportation. So I think if you're looking to build a business to make money today, that's probably a good place to look. I think socially there are a lot of other applications that are more hindered, and you know, I don't know how many people have studied Christensen, but I've been a strong supporter of Christensen. He's a business, it was a business consultant out of Harvard, and he talks about, when you're trying to start a new business, pursuing unserved markets, not going in where a lot of other players there. And a lot of players are in the transportation market. It is a crowded space. And so bringing in a new technology like personal data stores in that space, I think has huge value, but you'll be up against some pretty stiff competition. And if things pick up, they will pick it up too. I think there are a lot of services that just don't work without personal data stores. Some of them are very socially oriented, and maybe won't be the big money makers, but will have huge social impact. And some of them are big money makers. Let me give one that's a social impact. I think as we look at delivering of social services, things like dealing with the homeless issues and others, the beauty of personal data stores, and one has to understand that personal data stores can be fairly heavily automated. They do not need a PDA. They don't need a smartphone. Though, interestingly enough, I don't know if this is the case worldwide, but certainly in the United States, a lot of homeless people are given phones. Often they're sort of hand-down phones, but a lot of them have smartphones. In many cases, because they can be a lifeline, and charities make sure that they have phones because they can be notified of services like, when we have a freeze in the evening, and people who stay on the street will die, they send out an alert to those phones to tell people, hey, this place is opening with a shelter that you can go to. PDA will allow us to streamline that kind of personal information and those transactions in ways that make it affordable to give those services to people in social need. That's a huge issue. And I, when you're building a business, and we didn't sort of look at this at the beginning, as we've gone through the COVID crisis, we've looked much more at these issues because social issues come to the fore when you're that face to face with the life-threatening challenges of things like COVID and people being on the street. That that reduction of friction to those transactions can be hugely beneficial, making sure that the person who walks in the door and what they need. I mean, everything from when they last ate to what drugs they need to take can be encoded in a personal data store. Now, which municipality wants all of that information on their servers? It could be desperately badly abused. But if a person comes in and through just a thumbprint, that information can be now made available for any transactions and make sure that person gets the medications they need and the food they need. That's hugely beneficial. So I think there's a wide range, and I use that one because it is so at the other end from so many of the commercial applications we look at today that use large data stores to find things out about people, right? Those are perfectly good. I love the fact that I have an Amazon account and I don't really have to think much about all the infrastructure when I go to buy something. I just go out there, I trust them, I've done transactions before, I say, I want this, they ship it to me, they know my address, it turns up, it goes in my garage.
That's why we've got 2 minutes.
Okay, I'm not against data stores, but oh, you asked me to keep these short.
It's all good. It's because we're in a live session. It's all good. It's all good.
It's all good. Anyhow, that I think that sort of makes the point. It opens up a wide range of new business models, that some of which are socially oriented, some of which are commercially oriented.
Yep. So we've got a couple of questions. I'll just throw something out there because it helps answer a couple of these questions as well. One of the use cases we've investigated at Dataswift that Wilfred's aware of, that is sort of my dream for a smart city. It can start with something as simple as tourism. So if a visitor visits the city, this is actually where I came up with the idea of PDAs from originally. Where do you go? You want a local recommendation of where to eat. And so when you put a little bit of your data in a personal data account and it matches you to a restaurant or it shows you where to walk, you start building up these experiences, including things like if you give it to residents as they discover pizzerias that they didn't see before because they got a discount and it suddenly appeared in their app and it's based on their location data, And so you begin to create economic robustness around towns because you can steer foot traffic to maybe more dangerous parts of town that become less dangerous when more people walk through it. And it sees more economic rejuvenation because people spend there, so on and so forth, homeless alerts, whatever. Anyway, so Jim Sporers asked this, and we've got about 45 seconds left. Wilfred, I know there are many apps that work in most cities around the world. So World Around Me for local discovery. Are there any of these global city apps that use Open Commons infrastructure today?
Yes, but it's cheating to say that. We are a Open Commons, as I mentioned, is a member organization. So so all of the participants, and there are hundreds and hundreds of participants, have smart city apps and are collaborating with us. I think that on the one end, yes, all the members of Open Commons contribute technology, and they are in many cases municipalities that deliver services to their people. On the other end, how many of those are interoperable with one another? Very, very few. And to the question here, will smart cities happen in this century? Yes, but there's a gradation here, right? Smart cities are already happening. There are plenty of smart services in your cities, but they are so short of the value that they could be providing and the simplicity and capability that they could be providing, that we are still very early in this game, and there's a lot of opportunity out there for people who want to deliver these kinds of services to build a business.
Yeah. Thanks, Wilfred. So as a final plug, it is an open source app, guys. Let's get on this. This is the fastest way to create smart cities. Services starting with your mobile phone. We all spend all day on Instagram, but we can do this with any amount of services. So get creative. Thank you very much for your time, Wilfred.